The agenda is set. Hello, everyone. I'm Brent Goff in Berlin. Today on the show, protests and power. How you challenge the system may be just as important as why. Today, the naked truth in voices of dissent. It's time to talk. Anger across Turkey. These crowds accuse the government of Islam creep, trying to turn back the clock on secular society. Is this a Turkish Arab Spring? The Prime Minister says, not on my watch. We're here in the Eurozone. An economic crisis threatens to morph into social disaster. 6 million young people out of work and no hope on the horizon. Show me the money. The Blockupy movement is taking aim at the European Central Bank, accusing it of pushing a policy of poverty. And it labels Germany as the enemy of the poor man. And exposing hate against women by exposing themselves. FEMEN activists going topless to get their message to the men on top. 3 European FEMEN activists are in police custody in Tunisia for baring their breasts against what they say is the oppression of women. But some feminists condemn them, saying showing more skin does more harm than good. Well, I've invited 3 people today to talk, argue, and pry apart these headlines. My first guest surprised Russian President Vladimir Putin and the German Chancellor Angela Merkel earlier this year in a topless protest against the imprisonment of the female band Pussy Riot in Russia. I'm happy to welcome to the show today Irina Kanova. She is one of the founders of FEMEN Germany. Irina, good to have you on the show today. One of the members of Pussy Riot is still in prison despite a legal appeal. Your photos from this attack, this mob attack, went viral. You got the headlines you wanted, but nothing changed.
You cannot change something with one action only. You have to attack again and again. So we're waiting when any dictator comes to Europe again, we're going to attack again.
And that includes Mr. Putin.
Exactly.
Okay, clear words there. We're going to talk about that a little bit more in just a moment. My second guest is on the front line of the Blockupy protest movement. He says Germany is responsible for the misery that southern European countries are going through. I'm happy to welcome to the show Alexis Pasadakis. He is with Blockupy Frankfurt. Alexis, how can you blame Germany for what is happening in southern Europe when Germany is footing most of the bailout bill? Most of the money is coming from Germany that's keeping these countries from going bankrupt.
Of course, we don't blame the German society, but the German government and other German institutions. We argue that austerity policies actually prolong and deepen the crisis and that these austerity policies harm people in the south. And of course, the money which is going from Germany to the south is not a donation, it's a loan, so you get something back. And so actually Germany benefits from this crisis, very much so.
All right, but we're going to talk about the people who are saying that austerity is already dead in just a moment. Glad to have you on the show, Alexis. My next guest is back with me to talk about Turkey again. Now, last time we discussed peace in the country. This time, it's the very opposite. I'm happy to welcome back to the show Mehtap Sörler. She is a Turkish affairs expert and a political scientist. Mehtap, it's good to have you back. You know, you were here 3 months ago. We were talking about a peace agreement between the Kurds and the Turks. Did you have any idea that this kind of social unrest would erupt in Turkey?
No, I didn't have any idea that this mass protests will erupt. But I have expected that sooner or later there will be the last drop that splits the cup of bitterness and anger and anxiety towards the government's impositions on people's lifestyles.
Yeah, I mean, an incredible story about how quickly also things have changed in Turkey. You know, it was just last month when Turkish Prime Minister Recep Tayyip Erdogan boasted during a visit to the U.S., Turkey no longer talks about the world talks about Turkey. Well, how true those words ring today. Now, the protests of this week are the first real setback in the decade-long rule of Erdogan and his Justice and Development Party. And there's another irony here. Erdogan gave birth to these protesters. Those that he labels extremists and marginal groups are doctors, lawyers, and entrepreneurs, the educated middle class that has grown in numbers under his economic policies. And now they want to be heard.
A peaceful protest to save a small urban park in Istanbul has snowballed into the worst anti-government demonstrations in Turkey's recent history. The authorities' initial heavy-handed response brought to a boil simmering frustration at the government's increasingly intrusive style. The violence has spread beyond Istanbul to Ankara and Izmir. Turkey not only geographically straddles Europe and Asia, but also has to bridge the cultural gap between a large, mainly conservative rural population and more liberal city dwellers. Turkey's Prime Minister Recep Tayyip Erdogan has won 3 landslide elections with the resounding support of the rural population. But his conservative policies and authoritarian style have not won him many friends in the big cities. It is unlikely that tear gas and water cannons will be the solution to Turkey's current crisis.
Mehtap, how do you look at this? Are these events going to go down in history as the events that changed Turkish politics in the 21st century?
That might change, these protests might change the course of the Turkish politics, especially it will decline the legitimacy of the government, AKP government. On the one hand, we see that especially the young people experience during the protests that they change something, and they sort of enjoy the victory of rebellion, and they think that they have the power and they can hold their future in their hands.
How much power do they have? Because no political party has come out and aligned itself with them, and they're not claiming to be with a political party. I mean, these are people from all across the spectrum of society, the educated spectrum. So where's their power?
The power is, I think they have already threatened the government, and they have said that the government has limits to its power. They are not really, not all of them are politically affiliated, and I think most of the young people there, they experienced for the first time in their life, they were at a political meeting. But I think this experience is that they are side by side with like Kurds and Turks, nationalists, feminists, communists.
I mean, it's everybody together.
Young people from slums of Istanbul, they were all there, and they said, oh, it's not the end of the world, and they can also transform something in their country.
How do you read the way Erdogan has reacted so far? I mean, he's basically, he's dismissed them, but he's also, he sounds a lot like Russian President Vladimir Putin, doesn't he? I mean, he says that there are forces outside the country that are influencing these people.
Yes.
Hasn't he learned the lessons from the Arab Spring?
Not really, and it is really ironical that he tries to he opposed Assad regime, and he criticized Assad regime for being so dictatorial, suppressing the people in Syria, and now he does the same thing to his people. And
we can't equate him with Assad, right? I mean, he's been elected.
We cannot, and he's not. Absolutely not a dictator.
He's not a dictator.
Not a dictator, and Turkey is a democracy.
Right.
But the politics of Erdogan was again and again elected because the people wanted a new civic libertarian constitution,
right.
And they wanted also that the AKP finds a peaceful solution to the Kurdish question.
Right, and which they've got.
The last constitution making, the process has turned out to be the process or attempts of Erdogan to change the regime from parliamentary regime to presidentialism,
right.
And then become a president next year. And this has blocked everything. And if it goes like this, if it provocates the people and doesn't appease the protesters or the public resentment, then it will be the case that also he jeopardizes the peace process
Between the Kurds and the Turks.
Yes,
right.
yes. I mean, the good things that happened that can be also jeopardized because the government's legitimacy has been declining. Also, among the grassroots of the AKP.
Let me pull in the other two here with us, Irina and Alexis, and ask you guys. This anger is being vented right now through protests. Are these protesters, do you see in them the ability to fundamentally change politics in Turkey? Alexis, I'll ask you, do they have the power?
Mm-hmm. Well, if you look at the protests which have happened during the last month and years in Europe, there's actually no recipe how really to change societies. I mean, there have been a lot of protests against austerity, against social cuts, but also for real democracy. I mean, this idea has been really strong that liberal representative democracy is in decline in Europe, and that we have to reinvent democracy in order to found a real democracy. So protests have been strong, but there's no recipe on the floor. Somehow a lot of protests take place, also strikes, for example, but the state apparatuses, they do not really respond so far.
Which is what a lot of people are claiming now.
Yeah, so I think we have to find a recipe to really change power, but that will be in the future. It's not yet on the table.
Irina, what do you think the weapons of the protesters are right now? Erdogan said that Twitter and social media are the biggest threat to society.
Well, it is the biggest threat for him because right now he's trying to become a dictator in a way because those kind of signs, the first signs that he shown are the signs of the development of dictatorship. You know, the free press is not existing, the free speech is not existing. This is the first signs, and especially at that time, I'm really proud of Turkish people that they recognized those signs and they fought back. But the problem is with a dictator, they do not sit down on the table, they do not discuss with you the best ways how to get out. So I don't know how to fight dictators, but we do try with a peaceful protest to achieve our goals.
First. I mean, what do you say about this, Mehtap? Is this just the beginning? Can change come through peaceful protest?
Sure.
I mean,
especially through peaceful protests.
Do you have faith that Erdogan is not someone trying to become a dictator? I mean, Irina says when someone wants to be a dictator, they're not going to sit down at the table with you and talk about sharing power.
I mean, you don't have to be a dictator, and you can impose authoritarian policies. You can have authoritarian methods to deal with protests. I think this scale of protests has never happened in Turkey, you know, and therefore, especially during the AKP's government period, and I think. Yes, these protests will have long-term effects for the AKP, for internal affairs of the AKP, also for, I think in general, for Turkish politics.
Yeah, but let's look beyond politics though for a second. So let's talk about the society in Turkey. You know, the last time you were here, you praised Turkey as a possible role model for the Arab world in the Middle East, a secular society that is comprised mainly of Muslims. Yes. Now what we're looking at is a society that is divided. You've got Erdogan and his conservative Muslim party, and then you've got the secularists who are out on the streets protesting right now. Yeah. That's not a role model, is it? I mean, these two right now are yelling at each other.
I think, yeah, there's a polarization between the religious conservatives and the secular modernists in Turkey. But on the other hand, the AKP has done very important or historic democratization process during its period, and then it became more and more authoritarian. But still, we hear...
I know, I understand that, and you're right. There is a long list of good things that the AKP has done. Yes. But what is troubling, and is getting a lot of play right now, is that Erdogan wants this constitution changed so that he can go from being prime minister to president. I mean, it smells just like Russia. And how can we say that that is a system then that can be praised?
It is a system that can be praised. It is. Turkey has a very long history of democratic tradition, and also in the last decade, Turkey experienced a very, very important democratization process, especially with regards to the military's power in politics. But I think the problem is there that those who are in power try to occupy the state in Turkey. The military tried to occupy the state, and occupied the state and the politics tried to impose this state ideology, Kemalism on people. And now what the AKP, after surviving this party ban, after surviving a threat, of military intervention, it became more and more authoritarian. It's like a mirror image of the military, and tries to occupy the state.
Do you think the military is going? Do you think the soldiers are going to stay in their barracks if these protests continue? I mean, there are rumors that soldiers are passing out gas masks to the protesters.
Yes. Indeed, Erdogan now undermines his own power, because he gives legitimacy to anything that can stop his authoritarian policies. And Turkey...
So he's his worst enemy right now.
Yeah, yes. So many generals, they have been jailed, and the process, Ergenekon court case, has been going on. And there we really also don't know how it will end. And will Erdogan be appeasing all those, because he wants to be in power and sacrifice everything for power politics.
Yeah, all right, we need to move on. Just quickly, the arena, I mean, you're listening to all of this. You're from Russia. You're from the Soviet Union. Should the Turks be afraid? Some people say they're afraid of Islam creep, but there are also a lot of people who are afraid that Erdogan is trying to copy Putin.
I think exactly what he's doing. And but in exactly the same way, the religion is somehow on the way, which is the biggest danger for the human rights and for the development of the democracy. Okay. So we should be careful there.
All right. Religion, a big topic as well in that. But we need to move on here now and go from religion and politics and talk about money. Is there a light at the end of the tunnel that is known as the Eurozone crisis? A lot of people say no. Researchers from Oxford and Stanford have even put the crisis into numbers in a new book, The Body Economic: Why Austerity Kills. They point to shrinking national spending, growing unemployment, and even higher levels of suicide. Now, economists who travel to Greece, which is ground zero of this crisis, return with mixed opinions on whether austerity is working. But for one group, the answer is clear. Austerity must end.
Some 7,000 Blockupy supporters demonstrated in Frankfurt near the European Central Bank headquarters. They blame widespread cutbacks for the Eurozone's crippling recession and skyrocketing youth unemployment. Blockupy protesters are demanding an end to the austerity measures that have been championed by German Chancellor Angela Merkel. The President of the European Commission, José Manuel Barroso, has also said the Eurozone now needs to move beyond austerity and implement structural reforms to boost growth.
In the first place, labour market reforms, which are the best way to kick-start job creation. This will be particularly helpful for the young and the long-term unemployed.
But it looks unlikely that this proclaimed policy shift will placate the vocal supporters of the Blockupy movement.
I mean, we heard it right there, Alexis, from Barroso. Austerity basically is dead. Now everyone's talking about economic growth.
Well, I do think that this is basically a tactical retreat, because the figures are ugly. I mean, growth is going down in Europe since, I think, seven quarters.
Yeah.
Yes. More and more people are unemployed. So, of course, the European Commission has to react. So it's a tactical retreat saying that the targets are pushed into the future. So basically, austerity is not dropped, but it is prolonged and will come later.
Isn't that in effect an end to austerity? I mean, I agree with you. They haven't changed the terms of any of these bailout deals, but they have given the time window horizon has become much longer. Isn't that in effect an end to any strict austerity?
No, it is not. Because austerity has two sides. The first is that you drop public spending, that you cut public spending, and the other side is structural reforms. And now they try to separate those two, but which belong together. And they say they will continue structural reforms, which is also a type of austerity, of course, because the most important target of structural reforms is to drop wages in public sector, but also private sector, and that is austerity. So they play a little bit around with the terms, and they push it into the future, but the general course is not changed.
Tell me then, how would you and Blockupy, how would you like to see the Eurozone governed? What do you want done now?
Well, first of all, drop the debt. Countries like Greece, Portugal, Ireland, and also other countries can't just pay these high debts, so they have to be dropped.
Forgiven?
Yes.
All right, so this is more than a haircut. You're talking about forgiving billions and trillions of euros of debt.
Of course, because they can never be repaid. These debts are so high they can never be repaid, so they have to be dropped. Second is you need investment programs. Investment programs in social infrastructure. You have to stop cutting wages in public sector, stop privatization, so a new kind of economic development can start. And with austerity, you cannot have this economic development.
But you know, what you're saying here, how in the world are these governments going to get the money to invest in all of these social programs that you want if they first forgive all these debts? You've created a moral hazard here. You're telling the markets that Greece, Italy, Portugal, Spain, if they start spending too much, if their debts get out of control, we'll just give them a haircut and start over again. No one's going to buy their bonds. So where are these governments going to get the money from?
Well, if you look at history, debt crises always have been solved that way. There is no other way, because the money can be paid back.
Yeah, but the Germans disagree with you there. The Germans say there is a way. There is a way. Be with austerity and reforming your fiscal policies and spending the money you have. What is wrong with that?
Well, if you look how austerity works, it is not a solution to the crisis, but it prolongs the crisis and deepens the crisis. I mean, the figures clearly say that. So what is the actual idea behind austerity? It's not to solve the crisis, but it's a means to shift the power balance within societies for the benefit of the corporations, the investors, and against workers in public services, workers in general, people who receive public money via transfers. So the power balance is shifted and it becomes more profitable to invest. This is how austerity has always worked, because there are many examples in history. If you look at Latin America in the 80s, the 80s are called the lost decade in Latin America because of austerity policies. And the outcome of these policies were that the 1% got richer and the number of the poor grew. And exactly that is happening in Europe. So it's nothing new, and austerity is not a solution, but it's the problem, basically.
What about Germany in all of this? You at Blockupy, you say that Germany is really the monster in the Eurozone room right now.
Well, if you look how the power balance has shifted in Europe, Germany, at least the German government, is becoming stronger and stronger in this crisis. They push for these austerity policies, whereas in countries like Greece, Portugal, Ireland, democracy has basically been abolished, because you still have elections and all these kind of democratic institutions, but the main decisions are made by the Troika. So these countries are not independent and democratic anymore, not democratic in a real sense.
So you're saying that the vote of the people in these countries has no weight anymore? I mean, that's an incredible, that's a huge indictment to be making on countries that are democratic, where people can go to the ballot box.
Of course, I mean, the institutions are still in place, but if you look at the actual policies, they are imposed by the Troika, by the European Commission, the International Monetary Fund, and the European Central Bank. Those institutions, they make the basic decisions concerning economic policy, social policy, and all kind of other policies. So the term of democracy is empty, basically, in these countries. And that's why people are so angry.
Yeah, I mean, that's one point. Another way to look at this is that the governments that were democratically elected ran up these deficits and created these debts that these countries are now saddled with.
But that's not really true. I mean, you can clearly see that debt grew not because of public spending for infrastructure or social services, but because of the financial crisis, which started in 2008. This was a point of time where debt really grew massively to bail out the banks. And there were a lot of tax losses because of the crisis. So the financial system is responsible for this kind of crisis, but not the governments. I mean, wages were already low in Greece 5 years ago. So it was not the wages of public workers, but the banks. They are the culprits.
So what's going to have to happen now then? Do you see your voice with Blockupy being heard? Are you going to make a change? I mean, you're talking about a huge democratic deficit in Europe right now. Is anyone listening?
Sure. I mean, tensions are growing in Europe, that's for sure. There are more and more protests. So far, there's no real recipe how to change, because the state apparatuses respond with violence. They do not listen to our demands. But if you look at Latin America, for example, it also took a lot of years until change happened, but in the end it happened, and we fight for that.
What do you say to this, Mehtap? Is Europe right now, does Europe needs a good dose of protest like we're seeing in Turkey? I mean, is the democratic deficit here so bad?
I think yes, indeed. But on the other hand, the main problem is, I think, the difference between the national level and the international and transnational level. The German people think that these austerity policies imposed on other countries in crisis, they are good because at least then it will easy for the German government to settle things down here. But the crisis is on the international level, and these boundaries, national boundaries, makes difficult for the people to understand the interconnectedness.
Yeah, so is that the problem with the way we vote? Irina, you were telling me earlier you don't think we should be even voting for candidates anymore. You think we should be voting on issues.
Exactly, because we see the history shows that every person in power mistreats it and leads us into the wrong direction. But the technology is so advanced right now, we can use it already. We hook to Facebook almost every day, and we can use this technology to vote for the things that were supposed to be done in our society, things that who actually made this power, who made this kind of disbalance in the society.
Yeah, I mean,
where does it come from?
That's a good question.
Exactly.
I mean, well, you've got, Alexis saying here it's coming from the banks. Some people say it's coming because the Germans, the Northern Europeans, want to preserve the euro at all costs. Is that where we are, Alexis? Preserving this currency no matter what happens?
Well, if you look at the policies which are put in place at the moment, I think they will destroy the euro, because the imbalances between the different countries, they even grow bigger and bigger. So these policies of the European Commission and of the German government, I think, will destroy the euro in the end. I think that will not achieve their goals, actually.
When's your next protest?
There will be protests in Germany in September. Our aim will be to put the question of redistribution on the agenda. But of course, protests are going on all the time in Europe at the moment.
That's true. And protests, we want to stay on that topic. You could call their method of protest the flashers, flash mob. FEMEN activists protest the plight of women around the world, and they do it by using one very female part of the body as their billboard. It gets global attention and it gets them arrested. But does it bring about change? And why do some women frown upon this and say, ladies, put your clothes back on?
The cameras are always on when FEMEN protesters bare their breasts in the name of feminism. From protesting patriarchal Islamism in Tunisia, to demonstrating against the Pope, and to the objectification of women in top model Heidi Klum's TV show, the self-proclaimed sextremists have come out on a number of different issues. But FEMEN's brand of militant feminism is as controversial as it is media savvy. And a growing number of critics in feminist circles are questioning their methods. Many say their sensationalist tactics are turning them into sexual objects, the very thing they are protesting against.
Irina, is that what is happening here? Are you becoming or strengthening the idea of women as a sexual object?
Women are always a sexual object. As you see, our bodies are used to sell all sorts of products.
So why use your breasts then to protest?
Because this is our breast, this is our body. It has nothing to do with these products, and we take it back. We fight. We have this decision over our body. We took it back and use it to our purposes, for our political protest. So it's a kind of upside down, changing it, the way we use women's body.
The feminists look at you and shake their head and say that you are turning the clock back on all the progress that has been made for women. By doing this.
There are many feminists. So some feminists say that we are doing the right way, which is including Alice Schwarzer. She understood us and she thinks that we are on the right way. But the other feminists who I don't really consider feminists, because feminism for me is fighting for the rights. And we actually fighting in front, like almost on the very exact point, like in front of the enemy that we've chosen.
And who is the enemy right now? Let's pick up on this case where we have these 3 European FEMEN activists in Tunisia right now.
The enemy is the patriarchy itself, and everywhere when it shows their face, we are ready to attack. And the 3 kind of manifestations of patriarchy right now, we see it in sexual exploitation of women and religious oppression and dictatorship, which is actually oppressing as women and men.
I mean, okay, but let's talk about what's happened in Tunisia. There we have 3 European FEMEN activists who went there, and they had, this protest, took off their shirts, and they were immediately arrested.
Yes. So you see how dangerous it is for, the patriarchy saw that they're so afraid of human body, they are so afraid of women's breasts that they put them in jail.
Yeah, but is that oppression of women? Isn't that just social mores? I mean, in most societies, being naked is something that you do in private. You don't do that in public.
In many societies, you do it in public. For example, in Africa, before Islam came, it was okay, it was normal. The human body, it is normal. We are born naked. The God, if it exists, created us naked. So there is nothing wrong in our bodies. But women's body, it is in focus of patriarchy. It is all the time attacked. They want to wrap us in some clothes. They want to take away our right to abortion. All sorts of things are always attacking women's body.
You got a lot of attention recently when there were these I call them these flash attacks where you take off your shirts in front of mosques across Germany. There was one here in Berlin as well.
Across the whole countries, across the whole world.
Across the whole world. And who are you attacking, or what are you protesting there?
Actually, this protest was in solidarity with Tunisian activist who openly said she wants to be a feminine activist, and she posted a naked photo of herself with the slogan, "My body belongs to me and no one's owner."
Right, and she was arrested for that.
She was not arrested, but the religious leader demanded stoning for her.
Right, okay.
So this is actually what exploded the roles of protest all over the world.
But the religious leader was also a Salafist. I mean, an extremist among the Muslim religious leaders. And many would say he does not represent all of Islam. I mean, he is an extremist. And but does that message come across when you protest in front of a mosque here in Berlin, for example? I mean, aren't you indicting everyone who goes into that mosque?
No, of course not. This mosque was chosen symbolically. Every protest we do, every person knows what symbols are, what metaphor is. So this is a symbol of religion, and this is a symbol what we've chosen to use in our protest.
Is Islam an enemy for FEMEN activists?
Of course. There are all sorts of attacks from religious leaders that they want to kidnap the girls. There are all sorts of threats, death threats that are referring to, for example, Inna Shevchenko, the leader of FEMEN. All the time they're attacking us, so we are just taking our power back over our bodies. What is so dangerous in our body? What do you think they are trying to get across?
Let me ask you, what do you say about that when you hear what Irina has to say?
As I wonder only, you are a feminist, and I'm sure that you also want to reach religious women, like Muslim or Christian. And I'm wondering, it might be the case that, I imagine a Muslim or a Christian woman, religious woman, watching your protesting topless in front of a mosque or, I don't know, church. Wouldn't it be some sort of counterproductive for your cause? I mean, how do you have some feedback from them, or is it really?
We have lots of feedback.
And the feedbacks are, in general, positive, or I mean, what is for me interesting? Of course, this is like a performance art. It is a really interesting art type of protesting. But on the other hand, it might be also for you a sort of impediment for achieving your cause.
I don't think I don't think it is an impediment on achieving our goal.
Let me ask you this: Do people, when you take your shirt off, do they see anything beyond your breasts?
I hope so, because we don't only take our clothes; we also have some idea, some message that we want to put across.
Did you look at? I'm trying to look back at the video and the pictures of the protest in front of Putin and the German Chancellor Angela Merkel. He almost laughed about the situation and just kind of brushed it off.
Well, he laughed also at 10,000 people who were demanding fair votes. He also laughed and called them that they were wearing condoms or whatever they were doing there, like the little bench that they had.
Yeah.
So it's all right for a dictator to laugh at us. That's the only thing that he can do right now. But
are there?
Actually, we also what I wanted to add about the protest, that we are not only putting our clothes off. We're also very loud. We are angry, and we are showing that the woman could be. Also alternative way, not submissive, not put in such pose that we actually always put by patriarchy.
Are there limits, though, to what can be declared as protests?
The only limit we've got is violence. We never use violence against people. And we are protecting human rights, and all over the world. They're universal. They could be everywhere, all over the world.
What about, I've been looking at some websites on Facebook, for example, from coming out of the United States, but also out of the Middle East. There are Muslim women who have put up, their comments against FEMEN activism. They say what you call activism is actually colonialism. It's a very European way of looking at the world, and they're happy covering up parts of their body, and it doesn't have anything to do with oppression.
Well, we are not against that they are happy for covering their bodies.
Yeah.
We are against that some other people want to cover them by force. And this is actually a big problem which they are trying to neglect. And they're trying to show us as if there is no such problem. But we know there are many facts of violence in those countries.
Are there men who are in your group, in your FEMEN activist groups?
In FEMEN Germany, there are no men.
Do you want men?
Well, of course, we need help. We need lots of help with our protests, and which we actually do not do is to use men in the protest itself, because it's a women's group, and this exactly ideology of it to use that we use our bodies ourselves, and that we're trying to make it normal. That it is okay for the man to use, like, to put his shirt off, but it is not okay for the woman.
Alexis, what do you say to that?
Well, in general, I do think that it's good to have a very pluralist feminist movement, and I think FEMEN is part of it. I think it's good that FEMEN triggers debates within the feminist movement. I think it's very fruitful, actually. Of course, I would also say that, especially in countries like Germany, you have to take care not to be Islamophobic, because the right-wing forces could use it, but I think it's good to have it.
We're going to have to wrap it up, and very quickly, Irina, will we see you again protesting?
Yes, of course.
All right, there you heard it, folks, and that's going to wrap up the agenda this week. Don't forget, you can watch the show again on our website and on YouTube, and don't be shy. You can tell us what you think about the show. Our inbox is always open. You see the address right there on your screen. I'm Brent Goff in Berlin. Join me next time when I set the agenda.